to you watching this. If you're welcoming back, then hello, welcome back. And if you're new here, hello, welcome to the Liability YouTube channel where I, Bree Cheyenne, mostly talk about unsolved crimes against children, anything from older to newer. If that does sound like something you might like, then hit the subscribe button and notification bell to stay updated on future cases. And without further ado, don't like to keep the intros too long. Let's go ahead and get started. The body of a pretty young boy was found in Fox Chase, Philadelphia in 1957, but multiple efforts to obtain his identity have been unsuccessful. Known as America's Unknown Child, his death has conjured up multiple theories as to who he was and what may have happened to him. This is the case of the boy in the box. In February of 1957, a man named John S. was checking on some muskrat traps that he had set when he made a grim discovery. Inside of a box that once held a JCPenney bassinet, now held the corpse of a 3 to 6 year old boy that was naked and extremely malnourished, as well as beaten pretty badly. Out of fear of getting in trouble with the police because of the muskrat traps that he had, John S. decided not to report his discovery to the police. However, a college student named Frank made the same discovery not long after, and although he was also hesitant to report the discovery to the police, he ultimately decided to because he had recently heard about a girl that disappeared from New Jersey. The young boy's body was discovered in the woods of Susquehanna Road in Fox Chase, Philadelphia. He was described as white, 40 inches tall, weighing about 30 pounds, and as I mentioned earlier, between 3 to 6 years old. His nails had been recently trimmed, and his hair was also cut pretty poorly, might I add. When he was found, there were like clumps of hair sticking to his back. And it's possible that these altercations were done post-mortem. He had multiple scars on his body, including on his groin area, chest, elbow, neck, chin, and ankle. It was apparent that he was also submerged in water shortly before his death because his fingertips, they were wrinkly. You know, when you've been in the bathtub for too long, you get those wrinkly fingers. There were multiple loosely strewn clothing items found around the crime scene, including a yellow flannel, a tan scarf, black shoes, and a handkerchief with the letter G on it. The shoes were not a match for the boy. Philadelphia police received the report and they opened an investigation on February 26, 1957. The boy's cause of death was determined to be from blunt force trauma, but the questions that still remained were who was he and why would someone commit such a horrible crime against him? And one of their first attempts to find out who this boy was, they did take his fingerprints in the hopes that they would identify him or someone might come forward with an identification as they went further along into the investigation. Now, even though the discovery of this boy's body was getting a lot of attention, no one came forward to claim him or claim to know who he was. Because of that, I believe that it had to be someone that was close to him, because if it was not someone that was close to him, there's just, to me, no way that they didn't hear that this boy's body had been discovered. So in all the cases that I have personally read about, I never heard of the press doing this, but aside from the normal flyers people put out for rewards of information and newspapers and stuff like that, aside from that, there were, by the way, 400,000 of those were released. They also included in the envelopes of the gas bill of every Philadelphia resident a flyer of this boy. Police themselves distributed a photo of the boy post-mortem dressed and in a seating position in the hopes that someone might recognize him in a more flattering position. They were able to trace the JCPenney box back to a Pennsylvania store, and they discovered that it was bought sometime between December 1956 and mid-February 1957. They were unable to trace it to a specific buyer, and when it was sent to the FBI for testing, they were also unable to obtain any fingerprints. A blue corduroy hat was also discovered at the scene, and they were able to trace that back to another Pennsylvania store, this one in South Philadelphia. When questioned, the owner did say he remembered the person that bought it and said that it was a man between his 20s and 30s that resembled the boy that was found. He remembered that the man wanted a specific detail added to the hat, a buckle on the back. The police searched in vain for this man. Ultimately, none of the clues they found or investigative routes they went down really led anywhere because they really didn't have much to go off of. There were no identities and very little evidence. 5 months after the discovery of the boy's body, he was buried in a potter's field in Philadelphia on July 24th, 1957. If you are unsure what a potter's field is, and have no shame because I actually found out myself when I was researching this case, but it's actually a burial field for people that are unclaimed or unknown, which is actually so sad when you think about it. All of the attendees at the funeral were either detectives that were working on the case or just police from nearby areas, which is also kind of sad when you think about it, but something that might give you like a little hope. A civilian did heed all the costs for the funeral service and everything, his burial and all that, so I thought that was really sweet. One of the routes the investigation led investigators down was to a family that fostered quite a few children, many of them at any given time, and they lived about 1.5 miles from where the boy's body was discovered. In a large stone house resided Arthur Nicoletti, along with his wife Catherine Nicoletti, her daughter from a previous marriage, Anna Marie Nagel, and they will be fostering anywhere from 5 to 25 kids at any given time. At the time police were questioning them, they had 8. Anna was apparently dealing with some mental health issues and was unable to live by herself. Anna Marie Nagel did have 4 children out of wedlock by this time, which during this time was 1950s, much more looked down upon. And some people believe that this may even have something to do with the boy's death. At the time the family was questioned, only 3 of Anna's children were living after one of them died in a freak electrocution accident at an amusement park in 1955. After questioning the family, though, they were unable to find any evidence that linked them to the crime, and they kind of ruled them out as suspects. In 1960, an employee of the medical examiner's office, Remington Bristow, decided to pursue his own investigation into this boy's death. After initially struggling to really produce anything of merit, he decided to contact a psychic. This psychic, who was, I forget if I said it or not, was based in New Jersey, and they told Bristow that they would be able to help him if he could bring them 2 pieces of metal that were related to the boy. With 2 pieces of metal that were from the box that the boy was found in, Bristow took those with him and he headed off to New Jersey. The psychic told Bristow that the boy came from a large stone house with a log cabin on the property. Based on this information, Bristow did discover the nearby house of the Nicolettis, and eventually the psychic was brought down to Philadelphia, where they also led Bristow directly to the Nicoletti's property. The Nicolettis eventually decided to stop fostering children, and they sold their home in 1961. Bristow believed he might find some clues in the house, and he decided to attend the estate sale for it. While he was there, he noticed a few things that could be considered circumstantial evidence. Firstly, there was a bassinet there that looked like it could have been the one that would have been contained inside of that JCPenney box. Secondly, there were blankets hanging up on the clothesline that closely resembled one of the blankets that the boy was found wrapped in. And lastly, there was also a pond behind their home, which could explain why the boy had the wrinkly fingers and toes. So basically, Bristow's theory was that the boy was one of Anna Marie Nagel's children, and that he was killed because she was unwed and they didn't want people to know that she had children out of wedlock. You know, this theory doesn't make much sense to me when you think about it, because like I said, she still had 3 other living children, so those 3 children still prove that she was in fact still not married, so it doesn't make any sense. Of all the unidentified people Bristow had come across in his career, this boy stuck with him for some reason. He spent thousands of dollars of his own money and numerous hours of his own free time trying to find out what had happened. He nor the police were ever able to prove the involvement of the Nicolettis. Arthur Nicoletti refused to take a polygraph test, and that's pretty much where the investigation into them left off. Bristow ended up dying with the belief that the Nicolettis were responsible for the boy's death. Oddly enough, and this doesn't really have anything to do with the boy, but this is just weird to me, Catherine Nicoletti did end up passing, and then Arthur ended up marrying Anna, her daughter. Some people even think that the boy in the box could have been their child. So the case did go cold for quite a few years. I'm talking until 1998 it was reopened. Veteran Tom Augustine was assigned as the lead detective on the case. His first order of business was following up again on the Nicolettis. The Philadelphia police hoped that they would be able to match the boy's DNA to Anna Marie Nagel's to see if he was actually her child. So the police went to re-interview the couple in 1998, and they did ask if she had a child that had passed around 1957, to which she replied that she did. She told them about the one that had passed in the electrocution accident. This was also confirmed by death records, so they knew that she was not lying about that. It was an accident. They did also exhume the boy's body in November of 1998 for DNA extraction, but that route really went nowhere because they had nothing to compare it to. They did not get Anna Marie Nagel's DNA. After the boy's exhumation, a second burial for him took place on November 11th, 1998 at Ivy Hill Cemetery in Cedar Brook, Philadelphia. America's Unknown Child is what you can find engraved on the headstone. The boy's headstone, coffin, and services were actually paid for by the son of the man who paid for the burial in 1957, which is like warms my heart again. Much like the first burial, the only people that were really in attendance were officers that were working the case or officers from surrounding areas. Thousands of tips that have been received from a civilian created website, along with a dedicated episode on America's Most Wanted, did not help police advance any further in the investigation than they already were. That was until 2002 when another person came forward claiming that they had known what happened to this little boy. She's only ever been identified by Augustine as Martha or M, and she isn't regarded as being the most mentally stable, so some people kind of brush her story off, but I honestly don't find it all that far-fetched, and I am not even sure she's that mentally unstable that she would come up with a story like this. I'll get into it. Let me get into it. So Augustine initially came into contact with Martha after he was contacted by her psychiatrist in May of 2002, after Martha had called her psychiatrist demanding to speak to the police about this boy in the box. According to Martha's story, she basically has an abusive librarian for a mother. She says that in summer of 1954, they had drove to a home where she assumes her mother purchased this boy because they got him in exchange for an envelope. The boy, who M says was named Jonathan, suffered extensive physical and sexual abuse for the 2.5 years that he was in the home, this being alongside the abuse that she was experiencing as well. She said that he lived in pretty horrendous conditions in the basement with a drain for a bathroom and a makeshift bed. She claims that while they were eating dinner one night, he ended up vomiting, which sent her mother into a rage. She said that she beat him extensively, even slamming his head against hard surfaces until he became unconscious. She said that her mother went to give him a bath, but while she was doing this, he ended up dying. The boy was found with baked beans inside of his digestive tract, which this, along with the fact that he had wrinkly fingers and toes, were not facts that were released to the public. The alleged bath that her mother gave him could explain the wrinkly fingers and toes. Martha says her mother then cut the boy's hair to conceal his identity and then forced Martha to help her dispose of his body. She said that while they were trying to lug the box into the car, they were struggling, and a man on a motorcycle stopped and asked them if they needed help. They declined and he drove off, but apparently from what I read, this matches up with a confidential story that was given by a man in 1957. However, the source said that the video was no longer available. Martha's psychiatrist even said that she first heard the story many years ago, back in 1989, but she did not want to invade Martha's privacy. She wanted to wait until she was comfortable coming forward with it. The issue with this psychiatrist story, though, is that she apparently did not write any notes that would have corroborated that she told her this many years ago. So an article I pulled from CNN in 2002, which was around the time Martha came forward with her story, said that Augustine was arranging a search at the house she said this all happened at to see if they can match any of the details of her story to the facts of the case. I'm not sure if this search ever took place, and I honestly don't think it did, because it seems like they just kind of regarded her as being mentally ill and then just brushed it off. But I didn't find any articles that said a search ever took place. Now, through all the articles I did read, I didn't find ones that dove into M's story as much as I did this Reddit post. This is based off of I was gonna say a stranger with their own conclusions, a stranger doing their own research, but then I'm like, isn't that really every article, a stranger doing research? So, but take it with a grain of salt, it was on Reddit. What this person wrote is true. I just find it so hard to believe that Martha was like mentally ill, that her story was questionable mentally ill, and here's why. Growing up, she did extremely well in school. She participated in extracurriculars, she was a great student, and she graduated college right out of high school. She also apparently held a pretty high position at a pharmaceutical company from the 1990s to the 2010s. She was pretty truthful and forthcoming about the information she gave, like her identity, her work history, kind of like her basic background, location of the house, all that stuff. It seems to me like she grew up being a pretty decent person, but if the allegations she made against her mother were true, then I can see why she would need to see a psychiatrist. On the other hand, neighbors that lived around Martha and her family during this time said that Martha's claims were basically outrageous. However, if her claims are true, this definitely would not be the first time neighbors weren't privy to what was going on in houses around them. After learning the history of her mental illness and what they got from the neighbors, the police just dismissed her claims as outrageous. In 2008, a forensic artist named Frank Bender produced his own theory that the boy had been forced to live as a girl before his death. His reasoning for this theory being, firstly, the choppy hair. He believed that this may have been done in an effort to conceal his identity, and secondly, the boy's eyebrows were styled in a way that was more closely associated with femininity at this time. He did release a sketch of what the boy would have looked like with long hair, but nothing came of this. Another lead came in 2016 when two writers, Jim Hoffman and Luis Romano, contacted investigators with a potential identity for the boy. A Philadelphia man originally became aware of the possible identity and introduced Romano and Hoffman to one another. They believe he may have come from a family in Memphis, Tennessee, but they did need his DNA if they were going to be sure about it. They of course also needed something to compare the boy's DNA to, so the three did work together to obtain DNA from one of the family members in Tennessee, which they were able to get, and they sent it off to Philadelphia police. Local police confirmed that they would do some more digging into the possible connection before they tested the DNA samples, but in 2017 it was released that there was no connection between the samples. As of 2021, there haven't been any new updates from what I could find. I share this case with the intention of it hopefully reaching the right person that can help get it solved, and if you are that person, you can contact the Pennsylvania Crime Stoppers at 1-800-473-8477. That is going to also be in the description. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. You can hit the subscribe button and notification bell to stay updated on future videos. And if you do have any specific cases you would like me to cover, then go ahead and leave it in the comments. Thank you so much if you stuck with me all the way until the end. I really appreciate it, all the way from the bottom of my heart. If you want more content to watch, then you can check out my last video where I talked about the case of JonBenét Ramsey. Stay tuned for my next video too, where I will be talking about the case of Madeleine McCann. Thank you so much again, and bye guys.